Welcome to Guest of the Year. I'm the host. My name's Mike. This week's setlist curator is three-time Guest of the Year champ Todd LaMaskin. Todd is a professor based in Wilmington, North Carolina. You may remember Todd as the guy who deduced an 85 track based on hearing Jerry's larger-than-normal fingers on the fretboard. Singer-songwriter Josh Daniel called him the greatest podcast guest ever. Welcome, Todd.
Thank you. I remember when he brought that. I appreciate it. It's good to be here. I'm psyched to be on this side of the table, I must say.
This week's prize pack provider is Scarlet Fire Hot Sauce. Scarlet Fire is a small batch hot sauce made with Fresno habanero and Thai chili peppers. The label features original artwork by Jim Pollock. Scarlet Fire also won a Good Food Award in 2023. It's non-GMO, vegan, gluten-free, and made without any added sugar. A link to this amazing small business is in the show notes. Thanks so much to Marla over at Scarlet Fire. All right, here's how the game works. We'll play the first part of a Grateful Dead live track, and each contestant will use the messaging system to silently guess which year their performance is from. Contestants who are all on a video conference together can message in their guesses at any time during the clip or in the 10 seconds after it concludes. Whoever is furthest from the correct year is eliminated. The last two deadheads standing will hear 3 tracks, and whoever is closest to the correct years in aggregate wins. We've got our back-to-back returning champ Gavin here with us, and we'll meet the rest of the deadheads in a moment. But first, without further ado, the Grateful Dead.
Get peeking through a lace, and then I like a one. I Cheshire like a diamond, I jack of all colors, lazy golden, drink it up to a double, waterfall over my door.
Okay, the guesses are in. It was China Cat Sunflower at Greek Theater in Berkeley, California on July 15th, 1984. Todd, awesome pick. Tell us about it.
So this is probably my all-time Desert Island set 2. Set 1 on this night is a total freaking train wreck. It's one of these shows where it just doesn't match, set 1 and set 2. Set 1 is like dancing, and Jerry goes into bird song. It's this crazy dancing bird song, and they're just not even warmed up. And it's just a massive train wreck. It's like 7-song train wreck. Whatever they did during the set break, they come out, and set 2 just smokes from the first second they hit the stage until the end of the double encore. So this is the really famous Berkeley 84 summer run where they did an encore Dark Star on the first night. This is the third night. This is just energy through the roof. It's one of the first cassettes that I ever had, and it was in my car on auto flip. And I must have just auto flipped the cassette, 1,200 times or something. I love this soundboard. I'm a big fan of soundboards. Big fan of audiences too, but I'm a big fan of soundboards. I picked this section because it's just crystal clear Garcia. His tone is sharp when he wants it to be, soft when he wants it to be. And he just has these nimble fingers that just roll and hit every note, where he wants them to be. There's no gaffes. And so I just absolutely love this set and this particular part. So super curious to hear what people thought. Maybe the keys are a giveaway. Maybe it's so fast and he sounds really good for 84 that it's not. I'm curious to hear where people landed.
2 people got it exactly, 84. One of them is our 2-time returning champ, Gavin, who's 47 from Las Vegas by way of Chicago. Why 84, Gavin?
The keys, like Todd said, I don't want to say it gave it away, but it definitely pointed me in the right direction. And I felt pretty comfortable guessing 84.
Tommy also guessed 84. Tommy is 46 from Sacramento. You're on in the next round, Tommy. Why 84?
Well, initially, just with the clarity of the recording and the soundboard, my brain went actually much later, probably went to like 89 or 90, just because the clarity of the recording is so good. But then, like Gavin said, the keys drew me back. It was the speed, really. Like Todd said, that they're playing so quick. That's what told me it was 84.
Nice pull, Tommy. So David and Grant both guessed 85, so everyone's on to the next round. We'll meet Grant, who is 62 from Glenside, Pennsylvania. Grant, tell us about 85.
You know, I was on the fence. Jerry's voice kind of spoke 85 to me. It had that 85 raspiness, but like Gavin was saying, the keys, that should have been a clue that it was the 84.
Lastly, David is 44 from Manhattan, 85.
Well, the first thing I heard was Brent with the plinky, 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 but fast. Not like the early 80s plinky, not like a slow Fair and the Devil, but really hyperactive plinky. And with the tempos, it was definitely 84 or 85. You know, tempos evocative of the Bolivian marching powder that was kind of famous at the time. Kind of, I said 85 based on where the keyboards were in the mix, but I guess 84 could have done that just as well.
Thanks, Dave. Thanks, everyone. Everyone's on the next round. Todd's got another track. The guesses are in. That was a jam out of Eyes of the World at Freedom Hall in Louisville, Kentucky on June 18th, 1974. Todd.
Love Eyes of the World, probably my absolute favorite Jerry composition and Dead song for so many reasons. In 73 and 74, at the end of Eyes, they played this, what's called a modal jam. And there's this really great blog out there if you want to check it out. It's by Rennie Gazoo, dead. And he goes through all 77 times that they played this type of jam, this modal jam, out of Eyes between 73 and 76. And they would end it with that last little bit of a riff you heard, da-da-da-da-da-da-da. That's in 7/4 time. They stopped doing that in 74, but they continued with this modal jam. So the key tonality is E major 7 for Eyes of the World, and they would take it into a G sharp minor, an E flat minor, a D minor. Not so much chords as just changing the sort of the structure of the scales that you're using.
Don't forget that C diminished in there.
And a crazy C diminished in there, which I think Phil's on tape somewhere when he's having to relearn how to play that at some point, you know, in some of these later years where somebody came and they said, look, we want to play Eyes of the World with you, Phil. And they had to reteach him that. So this is to me, the best example of the jam out of Eyes and then into that 7/4. riff. They typically would take it into China Doll because it ends up in a D minor, which takes you straight into the start of China Doll. And it's just so funky. That riff that Jerry is holding down right there is just so funky, and it leads them straight into that jam. So I kind of figured people would guess 73 or 74, and just wanted to play what I thought was one of the all-time greats.
So when you say Eyes is your favorite song, is it your favorite song because you're a guitarist? Is it your favorite song to play, to listen to, or do you not make a distinction there?
I do make a distinction because whenever I learn how to play a song, it changes to me. But Eyes of the World was my favorite song before I learned how to play it. And it's one that I just, play consistently to myself. It's such a beautiful composition. I love that when sort of the verse section repeats the second time, it's actually a little different than the first time. The first solo is different than the second solo. So it sounds to the casual ear like it's just a kind of a classic ABC, but it's really different. Every time something comes around, it's different. I love that complexity in songwriting, and just the E major seventh tonality, just the overall happy, exultant sort of feeling. And it goes with Hunter's lyrics, so well. I don't often pay a lot of attention to words. I pay a lot more attention to music, but those words definitely get me. One thing that's really cool about it is, again, the E major 7, which is the main part of the song, they modulate to the key of G for the chorus, which is also super happy and bright. And Garcia was a master of modulation. Like, the song has a certain key tonality, and he walks a couple of chords up, and next thing you know, you're in a whole different key. So the chorus sounds really different, but it's also super bright and happy. To me, it's just really great songwriting.
Thanks, Todd. The only one to get it exactly was Tommy. Nice poll. How'd you distinguish that from 73?
I had that in the first maybe 5 or 10 seconds, and part of it was Billy's drumming was very solid. I could tell it was after that C diminished part where it kind of explodes back on that the E major 7, and when it went into the E flat minor 7 scale there, and kind of you could hear that either Phil or even Bobby, somebody was already going to the ba-da-da-ba-ba-ba-ba-da before Jerry even gets there. And that tells me that they had already rehearsed that part or had played it enough times to where the other members knew exactly where it was going to come in. When that change first came out in the beginning in February of 73, like Todd said, it often, I would say 9 times out of 10, ended in China Doll, because I think the songs were paired and almost written that way to actually kind of go together. But that first little modulation change that happens at the end before it gets to China Doll that resolves in the D minor wasn't quite nailed down. It was very rough. The chords were there, but almost in like kind of a loose, almost jazzy form, and then would later solidify up all the way through 73. And by the time they get to I would say May of 74, it's really nailed down to all those changes. And I also, being a guitarist and having played that song, played Eyes in countless different forms over the years. And oftentimes when you play, most people are just going to go back and forth between that A flat, G sharp minor, and the E major 7, and not do the rest of the modular changes from 73, 74. But I have played that twice live on stage. And if the other guys that you're playing with aren't familiar with that, or you haven't set up when you're going to change, you can see why at the beginning it was such a kind of like almost you're feeling it out as you go. But by 74, especially the end of 74, close to October, they had that really nailed down.
Ooh, that's some active listening, Tommy. Nice work. Jeez. David and Gavin both guessed 73 and Grant guessed 75. Everyone's on in the next round. David, 73.
I generally think of 74 as basically being 73 with more Phil Umpapa. So what kind of threw me was in that recording, I wasn't hearing Phil quite as full and chunky as I associate with the Wallace sound with 1974. If forced at gunpoint to pick one piece of Grateful Dead music to hear for the rest of my life, I will pick The Eyes of the World from Winterland, October 1974, 800 times till Sunday. That to me is perfection. I've watched the Grateful Dead movie and fast forward to that part hundreds of times. On Christopher Hazard's YouTube page, his channel, which is basically that's what I do most Friday nights after 12:30. He has it like restored. It's just gorgeous. The 73, 74 Eyes, that's as good as it gets for Grateful Dead.
Awesome. Thanks, Dave. Gavin, you also guessed 73.
With Dave on this, I thought it sounded a little too clean. 73 is when that started. That song was first played, and it sounded to me like more mid to late 73, just with the drums that I heard, and it just sounded really clean. And 74 to me is also a great year, but because they played so many shows and they were always playing, it got a touch more ragged, maybe similar to like when someone listens to 77 and 78.
And Grant, 75.
Well, I know there were only like 4 shows in 75, but it was Jerry's guitar tone that kind of had that 75 feel where they were just busting out all that Blues for Allah material. And I was leaning 74, but I don't know, it was that Garcia guitar tone. It's fuzzy, it's prominent, but it's a little fuzzy, and it just didn't sound like a 74 recording to me. And then when Todd mentioned the da, 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 I didn't know they stopped playing it that way in 74. That was interesting. So
an interesting note is that on that one from the Vault show where they play Eyes, they do change to the A flat G sharp minor and then go back to the E major 7, but do not do the bada 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 bada. They actually end up jamming out into the King Solomon.
This is some very high level guess of the year. Everyone is on to the next round. Let's hear Todd's next pick.
I'm gonna march you up and down the local county line, take you to the leader of the band.
The guesses are in. Ramble on Rose, the fabulous Fox Theater in Atlanta, Georgia, on October 28th, 1985. Todd.
I just love 1985, and I had to play some 85. 85 gets a lot of bad press. A lot of people blow the whole year off. I think it's a stellar year, and there's just many, many fine contributions. But for me, Fall Tour just tears it up from top to bottom, all the way back to the shows they did in California leading up to New Year's that year. And I just love this particular show at the Fox Theater. The bass is pretty low, although you could still hear it pretty well. The drums are low, the keys are low. Jerry's up really high, Bobby's up really high. And so you get this sort of dual guitar fest for the whole set. It actually doesn't start until the second song, Kansas City. Bob plays his slide solo and you can't really hear anything, and you hear the faders just get cranked up, and his volume goes way, way, way up, and it stays really high for the rest of the set. So I picked this particular piece because I love Ramble on Rose. I love this particular solo. And the very beginning of the solo is a really good example of Jerry's heavy fingers, where he's got a really heavy hand. And in terms of guitar playing, physically, he's got a heavy hand. It's 1985. But in terms of guitar playing, he's bending the strings a little bit more than he should have. He's putting a little bit more English than he should have. And he tweaks them to be just a hair sharp right before he kicks in that Mutron envelope filter. And then it's sort of hidden from there because the envelope filter is such a characteristic, that wah sort of sound kind of hides everything else. Love the interplay between Bob and Jerry's guitar. Ramble on Rose, just such a great song. Again, I think of it as almost like a Gershwin, like musical sort of song. You could imagine somebody standing on stage and just belting it out with all Hunter's lyrical references to all the great characters in history. And Garcia wrote just this really neat progression that goes behind it. So I wanted to make sure I got some 85 love on Guess the Year. This is, again, one of my all-time favorite. The whole set is really incredible.
The Jerry's heavy fingers observation is what precipitated Josh Daniels saying Todd is the greatest podcast guest ever. It was after you eliminated him in like the 5th song of the final or something.
We had a great competition, yeah.
And if anyone doesn't know about Josh, check him out. The man must have 1,000 songs in his head. He's great.
He's an amazing musician. He's all over the place.
Yeah. But Todd, I want to ask you, because in the moment, it was so shocking. I didn't even ask a follow-up question, I think. But as Jerry became a bigger man and he had big fingers, and did it affect his playing at all, physically playing?
I mean, my theory is that it did. He's still really nimble. He's still able to, execute fiery runs when he needs to. But so much of how you sound is in your fingers, and how you fret the note with your left hand, and also how you pluck the note with your right hand. And I just feel like as you go from 82 to 83 to 84 and then kind of peaking in 85, you really hear this change in his overall tone and sound.
Thanks, Todd. 2 people got it exactly and are on to the next round. David and Grant. Grant, we'll go to you, 85. How'd you dig that up?
It's funny. The most recent Dave's picks it's April 85. And when I first saw that, I went, And I don't know why I was poo-pooing it, because I saw a ton of shows between, 79 and 90. And 85 stuck out for a number of reasons, because I remember going to see him in Hershey Park, and it was a rainy day. Yeah, so the vibe wasn't as festive as it could be, but the prominence of Jerry's guitar, and like Todd was saying, nimble, fiery runs. Once I broke out this Dave's Picks 49 and listened to that Scarlet, the jam in the middle of that Scarlet there, I said, I got to go back and revisit some of these 85 shows again, because I'll hold that Scarlet up as one of the best of the decade. The jam in the middle of it anyway. And I think my problem with 85 was just, remembering the raspy vocals that Garcia had. But in this recording, the way Bobby was punched up and he was filling in so nicely, and the prominence of Jerry's guitar and the raspiness of his voice just spoke 85 to me.
And David, 85.
Well, I was initially thinking early 80s because I heard the Brent Plinky, and then that's why you got to listen to the whole song. Thank you, Mr. Healy. I heard the vocal manipulation, Jerry's vocals. I said, oh, he's 85. So I am an 85 truther.
Welcome.
I love it.
85 truther. I'll take it. I'm on that bus.
Okay, so Gavin guessed 86, and he's on to the next round because Tommy guessed 82. Gavin, 86.
I don't really have a lot. His voice sounded terrible, and I thought 86 was about the right time for that. I didn't think that Todd was going to do 2 84s in a row. So I was also kind of playing the game a little bit. And I thought 86 would be a good middle ground. I thought maybe, I guess it could have been 85. My mid 80s knowledge, as stated in previous episodes, is pretty suspect sometimes. And that's about all I can say about that. It didn't ring a bell with me, this one. Thankfully, I'm on to the next round. So
Every time you go on to the next round, you seem like somewhat shocked, and you've been doing it for now like 15 rounds. No one else is surprised except for you.
I've had some incredible competition, and I'm not going up against any amateurs here, and I am an amateur. So the fact that I'm moving along, I'm very happy about.
Tommy, 82. Tell us what you heard.
So the first thing in my mind was 85. Oh, this is 85, clearly. And then I thought to myself, like Gavin said, I was trying to play in the game a little bit, and I was like, oh, well, Todd just gave us an 82. Or 84. He's not going to give us an 85 right off the bat, and how wrong I was. I went to 82 in my brain because I was like, oh, it's raspy, and it's played pretty quick and pretty lively. And then that envelope was like, oh, it's 82, but I was clearly wrong. So Todd, you got me.
So how did you get into the Dead?
In high school, I wasn't much of a head at all. I was a grungy guitar player kid, going to see like the Deftones every weekend at like the local clubs kind of thing. But there was this kind of hippie-ish metal band called Kai Calm. And once I got to college in San Diego in 95, there was a lot of Deadheads there, and I quickly got into it. But it was 95, so I only got to see one show in Vegas, and that was it.
So you said you were a guitarist. Tell us about your live performance career and any bands you play with currently.
Well, it's different. I have the main outfit's a band it's called Ballin' That Jack. Surprisingly, not a Dead cover band, though. We play maybe a couple Dead songs, but I've played with a couple different people here and there throughout the years, but mostly just ensembles of people that are local around the area here. Nothing too crazy. Certainly no touring or that kind of thing.
Well, thank you, Tommy. I really appreciate you coming on. Your analysis was memorable, and that Eyes of the World outro observation will live on in Guest the Year lore. So thank you. Dave, Grant, and Gavin are on to the next round. Todd's got another track. All right, the guests are in, playing in the band at Northrop Auditorium at University of Minnesota, Minneapolis on October 19th, 1971. Todd, tell us about it.
So this is a sort of a night of firsts. The last show was August 26th, and this is October the 19th. They had taken a break, and they come out. It's Keith's first show. It's the first Tennessee Jed. It's the first Jackstraw. It's the first Mexicali. It's the first Comes a Time. It's the first Saturday Night, and it's the first Ramble on Rose. So the show is kind of well known for being a night of big firsts, but something that's a lot less known, and you got to kind of dig around to figure it out, is this is the first time they jammed on Playing in the Band. Prior to this, it's the version from Skull and Roses that does not have a jam in the middle of it. They go straight from one sort of theme to another theme. So while they were, working up these new songs, getting ready to put them out, somebody had the idea, hey, let's insert a jam in the middle of Playing in the Band. And so they come back from this couple-month break. In addition to all these other firsts, they jam in the middle of playing for the first time ever. And it'll go on to become the ultimate jam vehicle, right? There's like a 46-minute version of it from 5:27:74. It's in the Guinness Book is the longest improvised live piece of music or something ridiculous like that. And so this is the first time they ever sort of branched out on it. To me, it doesn't really sound like 71 because Garcia's playing Alligator already because it's the fall. It doesn't have that sort of grind sound that Skull and Roses had on it. So I'd be curious to see what people heard and what they came up with on this one.
This is a bit of a surface level question for a man of your wits, Todd, but do you like Tennessee Jed?
I love Tennessee Jed. Adore Tennessee Jed. The ending jam in Tennessee Jed is brilliant. The first 10 times I heard it, I thought that they were doing this thing we talked about earlier where they're modulating through different keys. But they're not. They're just playing the same 3 chords over and over and over again. But every time they get to the next chord, it sounds brilliant and bright and new. It's sort of like the ending of Terrapin, the big jam at the end of Terrapin. It's all the same thing repeated over and over again. But every time they get back to square one, it sounds different and bigger and better or quieter and crazier. So I think Tennessee Jed is a great song. I like the chorus and the verse, but the ending jam of Tennessee Jed, super fun to see them do live and always a good listen.
All these guys got it. 71. Nice work, fellas. We'll go to Dave first. Why 71, Dave?
It just seemed like a more primitive version of Playing in the Band. It didn't strike me as 72 because it didn't sound like Keith was fully integrated to the mix yet. It didn't have quite the yelpy, clean Bobby vocal I associate with 72. And it was just kind of like a rougher, more like garagey, fiery sound versus kind of 72's more psychedelia. So I figured, all right, this is certainly Playing. It's earlier. I think Playing debuted in 1971. So that's where I went from there.
Grant, 71 as well. Anything you want to add to Dave's analysis?
No, it just sounded like a nice early version. It didn't have that 72 big sound. It didn't have the 73 polish. So it certainly wasn't 74. I didn't hear that. So it just spoke early version, sounded like a 71 to me.
Great. And Gavin?
The only thing I can really add to that is that for me, Bobby's voice and his pitch in the song was reminiscent for me the very, very early days of that song. That, along with the keys and everything else, just led me to believe that it was right when it started, that song.
Great. Here's the next song. The guesses are in. Another China Cat Sunflower at Hampton Coliseum in Hampton, Virginia on March 26th, 1988. Todd, yeah, they had you pegged on the last one. They did not have you pegged on this one. Tell us about this China Cat.
So this is the first song that I chose where I was at the show. You know, born and raised in Richmond, Virginia, saw many a show at Hampton Coliseum and all around the East Coast. We went out for New Year's shows a couple times. We went up to Alpine. But Hampton is just an incredibly, incredibly special venue. And the Dead had played there for a really, really long time. And this set of 3 spring shows in 1988 is great. It's famous on the internet for, you can search for 2 things on YouTube. One is called Absolutely Rippin' Sugar Magnolia Scarlet Fire. And then the other is they played Stir It Up. They played 35 seconds worth of Stir It Up or something ridiculous like that in the first set. So Bob's playing Pepto-Bismol Pink. He's playing his pink modulus guitar, which was originally purchased for Bob Dylan to practice with, apparently, in the summer of '87 before they went out on stage. Bob showed up at the rehearsal studio without a guitar, Bob Dylan. So they gave him this pink guitar. He played it for practices, I think, and then he gave it back to Bob. Basically, when they went out on tour, he used his own instruments, I think. And so it's a famous Bob Weir guitar. On this night, it's got an incredibly particular sound. It's really plucky. It's really distorted. It's really high in the mix. And if you listen to the next night, it is less aggressive. And if you listen to the night after that, it's even less aggressive. So it's one of these very one-off guitar tones of Bob Weir's. I love it when Bob steps out. I think you asked me on one of my shows whether I was a Bob fan, and I said, absolutely. I just love it when he takes charge, basically. And in this particular one, he just lays down this snappy, aggressive rhythm at the exact right time and leads them into the sort of the fanfare, da-da-da-da-da-da-da-da-da, just in such a neat way. So I didn't know if I would trip people up on this or not. I thought if I might, it would be that they thought it was in the 90s, because Bob's guitar did eventually in the late 90s and mid to late 90s become loud and aggressive and distorted and much more prominent in the mix.
So since that's the board, do you remember Bob being prominent when you were there live?
Without a doubt.
Well, you were right. 2 people thought it was in the 90s, David and Gavin. They both thought it was 92, but they're both onto the finals because Grant thought it was 83. David, you're onto the finals. Tell us about 92.
I don't listen to a lot of 92, to be very honest. So what I have heard of 92 was Bob being very prominent in the mix, throwing down these big chords. And I often kind of associate Vince with having kind of a plinky piano sound, also leaning on those atmospheric chords, which you were obviously getting from Brent in this version. Like he would just kind of lean on the chords. Plus, the style of the recording sounded like something I would have heard from 92. But really, Bobby's guitar, the heaviness of the guitar, the prominentness in the mix, and the keyboards is what steered me towards 92. Added the fact that Todd is an incredible Dead scholar. I'm having so much fun, so I figured he'd try to throw a 92 in there.
Nicely done, Dave. You're on the finals, as is Gavin going for his 3-peat. Gavin, what were you hearing?
Not what Todd was playing. I know this is audio, but if you could see me with my head this close, my big bald head, trying to hear the keys. I couldn't hear the keys. Brent has a different affect in his performances, and I just didn't hear it. And so I was led to believe it was a Vince performance. Of course, I was disappointed that I couldn't hear them sing. Obviously, we hear their first words, we know, we have a better idea. So good on you for, messing with us like that. But boy, oh boy, I feel very fortunate. So good job.
And Grant, 83.
Yeah, I struggled to hear the keys for a while, but then it came through and I was hearing Brent. It just sounded like, I remember a number of shows in 83, and it could have been where we were in the arena, what have you. But Bobby just jumping in and getting really aggressive and filling in these empty spaces and just being much higher in the mix. It just reminded me of the 83 shows. That's all. That was a tough pick.
Yeah, well, Grant, I want to hear how you got into the Dead, and also I want to shout out Alyssa, who connected us. Alyssa, who is a huge booster of Guest of the Year and has been a booster of everything her son Dylan and I have done since we were very small. Grant, how'd you get into the Dead?
My first exposure was actually on vinyl. It was Aoxomoxua, and a buddy had turned me on to some great stuff like Zappa and Hendrix over the years. And we were like, I don't know, 14, 15, and we were listening to a lot of Stones and Zeppelin and Cream and Beatles and Bowie and Almonds, Buddy Guy. But those opening riffs of St. Stephen were a hook, line, sinker moment. And so I started sponging up as much as I could, and then found Europe 72 and just, it was an epiphany just because of the live element. And that was about maybe a year later, I had my first eye-opening in-person live experience when I saw Chicago, but with Terry Kath, who I will maintain, is one of the top 5 guitarists I've ever seen in my life. Fast forward, I went to my first show, September 3rd, 77, Englishtown. My family had just returned from a vacation in New Hampshire the day before, and I somehow convinced my folks to let me borrow the family truckster, think National Lampoon's Vacation, ostensibly to go to Great Adventure Amusement Park. And they said, sure, just so long as you and your junior license are back before midnight. And I was like, okay, cool. So we went, had to park a few miles from the venue and walked through mud and muck and enjoyed an insane show with 100,000 people in 100-degree temps. Got home around 3 or 4 the next morning and promptly lost my driving license for a few months. All worth it. Fast forward to 79, I started college in upstate New York, and like that period, 79 to 83, was essentially that area was like the buckle in the America's dead belt, and quickly fell in with a bunch of like-minded folks. So I caught, 2 Keith and Donna era shows, and then somewhere around 100 to 120 between 79 and 89. So I was really a Brent era kid. I had some memorable experiences, Radio City in 80 in Englishtown. I saw my St. Stephen at the Garden in 83, Dylan and Dead in 87. So it's been a lot of fun along the way.
I've always wondered this about Englishtown. So you park your car on the side of the road, it's muddy. And I guess that works for when everyone arrives at different times, but after the show's over and everyone leaves at the same time, how do you get out of there?
It was a lot of waiting around, and, I lived 45 minutes away, and hence getting home at like 3, 4 the next morning.
You were there from 77 on. What was your favorite year?
To this day, I love to go back to, the 77 stuff was awesome, 79, but I love these 87 shows. I kind of refer to 87 as the last best year because they, coming out of the illness of 86, and they just had this renewed energy and a tightness to the shows. A lot of the jams were truncated, but it was tight, and Garcia was healthy, and the playing was really solid. And out of that year, I love to hold up the pre-Dylan set where it was just the Dead on July 10th, 87, JFK Stadium. So I'm not going to say 87 was my favorite, but it's one that I go back to reliably. It was just a nice, clean, fun year.
Great answer. Thank you so much for coming on Guest of the Year. It's been a real pleasure chatting.
Oh, well, thanks. And it was fun to play with y'all. And Todd, I remember listening to your run and going, okay, this guy's got an encyclopedic knowledge. I'm just going to bow at the altar and listen to this guy. So when Mike mentioned you, we're going to be curating the set list, I said, this is going to be stellar. So thank you.
Thank you. It was super fun.
Tom, Gavin, Dave, good luck.
Thanks, Grant. Dave and Gavin are on to the finals. Whoever is lowest over the 3 songs in aggregate wins the Scarlet Fire Hot Sauce prize pack. Let's hear Todd's first pick of the finals. All right, the guesses are in. It was the Mighty Quinn at Henry J. Kaiser Convention Center in Oakland, California on December 27th, 1986. Todd.
I love that song. They played it once in 85, a few times in 86, and they mostly played it in the later 80s and into the 90s. And it's so close to the new year on December 27th. I was hoping that there might be a bit of a trick in there for folks. And they actually opened this show with playing in the band. It was the first time since 82 that they had done it. And prior to that, it was the first time since 72 that they had opened the whole show with playing in the band. And they weave playing in and out a few times. And this is one of those nights where Healy at the board does crazy stuff and Bob sounds like a chipmunk and things speed up and slow down. And so if you're interested in that sort of sonic wickedry that happens in some of these mid-80s shows, this is a really good one. And I'm worried that with these two masterminds here that they're gonna nail it. So I'm concerned to see what these guys have come up with.
Yeah, you're right. These guys are wizards, and they both got 86. This is a battle. Dave, 86. How'd you pull that?
I was initially thinking 85 because I thought, well, close counts and horseshoes and hand grenades and guess the year. So if I hit 85, it could be 84, it could be 86, but it's the final, so I got to take some big swings. So I landed on 86 because, to me, sonically, 86 is a bit of a transition year, and that Brent is still fixated on his plinky keys, but the drummers, they have more of a degree of pickup, and I think that they have more toys that carried into 87. So 86, you're kind of getting the 87 style drumming, but still with the 85 Brent sound. So in terms, I just split the difference, think I'm hearing 87 drums, but I'm hearing 85 keyboards, so it's probably from 86.
Nicely done, Dave. And Gavin.
Brent's keys were honestly the number one thing that got me to 86. Plus, I already had guessed 86 once. And so I figured if I keep stabbing at 86, eventually I'll be right. And sure as shit, I was right.
You guys are killing me. I feel like I approached this the entire wrong way.
Dave, how'd you get into the Dead?
Okay. I'm 44 years old. I'm originally from Connecticut. I moved to New York City in 2001. In high school, I'd say in junior high school and high school, because it was 92, 93, I was a grunge kid. I would listen, Pearl Jam, Nirvana, Soundgarden, also Faith No More, Red Hot Chili Peppers, kind of a lot of the stuff that was being played on MTV. It wasn't quite mainstream at that point. I still love all that music. I listen to all those records all the time. So there was a family in my hometown called the Glazers, and my family, the Goldsteins, were about as close to the Glazers as you can possibly be without being blood related. They had a son named Jason Glazer, who was 2 years older than me. So I have a younger sister, but I don't have an older brother. So I kind of looked up to him as an older brother. And because he was a little bit older than me, he had a car, so he could drive me places. And I began to notice that he would play Dead tapes in the car. In Connecticut, the small town I'm from is called Cheshire. There's a pretty tight Jewish community. And if you grew up in Connecticut in the 90s, you often did what was called these Jewish youth groups. So Jason was involved in these. He's like, hey, our town chapter has a Jewish youth group meeting. Why don't you come out? We'll meet some friends. So I started to go to these meetings, and I enjoyed them, and it stretched throughout the state of Connecticut. And I realized all these guys that were older than me, they all loved the Dead. They all traded tapes. They all had tape lists. And for some odd reason, it seemed like the ones who had the most tape lists had the most luck with the opposite sex, which is kind of ridiculous in retrospect. And I just started to accumulate tapes. And then I kind of began to learn with time that Jewish youth group in Connecticut in the 90s is just code for smoking pot, listening to the Grateful Dead in the woods. And also, In 1994, that was the year the seminal Steve Silverman, David Shank tome called Skeleton Key was published. And that became my Bible. I would just read that cover to cover, so much information. And I'm a really big baseball fan. I'm a huge New York Mets fan. And it occurred to me that following the Grateful Dead, it's like following a baseball team because there's so many statistics. There's good years, there's bad years. There's like some nights that are incredible, some nights you forget about. I was just like, this is where I'm at. This is my Dungeons and Dragons. This is my Star Wars. This is where my head's at. I really want to go deep. All throughout college, all throughout grad school, that was just, you trade tapes, great. I've got a friend for life. That's my love language. I probably listen to Fish almost as much as the Grateful Dead, to the extent that I've had a Fish podcast since 2017 called Beyond the Pond with my very, very good friend Brian Brinkman. So yeah, that's a podcast in which I try to get Fish fans to listen to bands other than Fish, because I say that they're a bit myopic. They just listen to Fish. So we say, well, if you like this jam, listen to My Bloody Valentine, listen to the Stone Roses, listen to some Can. And 128 episodes later, it's the same 2,000 dudes downloading every episode, I think. But that's it's got a lot of free beers at shows.
What's so important about leaving your comfort zone musically?
One of Bobby's complaints was the problem with Deadheads is that they only listen to the Grateful Dead. And you don't want to be myopic. I mean, there's so much out there. I think it improves you as a person if you go deeper and you go into some discovery, and you might make friends that you didn't realize that you had.
Beyond the Pond, it'll be in the show notes. It's a genius idea for a show. You guys are tied. You both pulled that 86, and we have 2 more songs. That was a jam out of He's Gone, and it was like a 17-minute He's Gone or something. I'm sure Todd could tell us more about that. At Cardinal Stadium in Louisville, Kentucky on July 6th, 1990. Todd.
I just love the Evil Dead, another one, for example, that just goes into dark territory. I love Evil Fish when they get all scary. There's just something about when the Dead in particular was just playing on the edge like that. I love this jam. I was at this show, and I remember, He's Gone, and then they do a typical sort of jam after He's Gone, and then it sounds like a little bit like Smokestack Lightning, and then it sounds a little bit like the other one, and then they just take off like a jet. Brent is following Jerry's licks just as quickly as he can, and Bobby's following those Brent licks just as quick as he can, and the next thing you know, Garcia's got all this feedback. By the summer of 90, things were, a little formulaic. They do He's Gone, they do a bluesy little jam, they go into drums. And, you're lucky if you get 2 or 3 minutes worth of jam. And this is, like some 15-minute-ish massive, massive jam out of He's Gone and into drums.
Thanks, Todd. So Gavin guessed 89 and Dave guessed 88. So Gavin was closer. Tell us about 89.
All these songs seem to point to Brent. Towards the end, when he did those last shows in Chicago, I don't want to say they were solemn or anything like that, but the energy level I felt like wasn't what it was even just a year or two prior. I didn't think it was 88. I definitely didn't think it was 90. So that's where I played the game and shot with 89 because that I felt like was the safest call.
And Dave, 88.
I didn't think it was 90 because I associate 1990 with a very full, almost orchestral sound that often kind of sounds like it was sprinkled with fairy dust. In particular, I'm referring to most of the shows from March of 1990, but it just didn't sound as full to me as I associate with 89, which may have been because of the tape. So that's why I settled on 88.
Okay, Gavin has a 1-point advantage over Dave. Before we proceed, Todd, this Friday, if you're listening to this on Monday, it's this Friday, you will be in conversation with John Brackett, the great John Brackett, about his book, Live Dead. And then after your discussion, there's going to be a Dead cover band playing. Could you just tell us a little bit more about this event and its genesis?
Sure. So I heard John's guest curation and just really, really enjoyed what he had to say and how he said it. And I looked him up online and saw that he was a North Carolina person. He had North Carolina's history. So I sent him an email and just said, hey, if you're ever, in Wilmington, let me know. I'll take you out for a beer, get a cup of coffee kind of thing. And we got to chatting. And he's been doing, lots of bookstores as part of his book tour. And I suggested that maybe he could come down to Wilmington, and he asked about a bookstore in town. And I said, I don't really know about a bookstore, but there's some bars in town that are super dead friendly. There's probably 3 or 4 of them that are super fish and super dead friendly in Wilmington, North Carolina. So I gave him the name of one of them. He called him and got set up. And so he's going to do a book talk at Fermental on March 29th. So he asked if I would sort of moderate the discussion. So I just finished his book earlier today. It's an incredible read, and I recommend it for anybody. Fascinating look at the tape trading scene with respect to the Dead production group's outlook on releasing live material of their own. So we're going to hang out for an hour and talk about his book, and then a Grateful Dead cover band called Steel Willin' is going to play for the rest of the night. And I'm looking forward to meeting John. And we're going to sit, and what could be better than sitting and talking about the Dead for an hour and a half?
What a format. When you told me that, that's probably the most excited I've been as something that's come out of Guest of the Year. If you're hearing this on Monday, it's this Friday, and I'll put that link in the show notes. I wish I could be there. I already explained the situation. Let's hear the next song. Okay. That was fucking rocking, Todd. Fire on the Mountain, Roanoke Civic Center in Roanoke, Virginia. on July 8th, 1987. Todd, tell us about that.
These are the shows where I became a Deadhead. I had seen the Dead in March in Hampton and enjoyed it, but I did not, I don't know if I quite got it. And Roanoke, Virginia is this tiny little town. They had played there in 1974. They were scheduled to play there in the fall of 86 and it got canceled. And this show is right in the middle of the Dylan and the Dead tour. The night before it is when they play with the Neville brothers. And so they've been playing with all sorts of people and they finally get a stage to themselves and they just absolutely shred. And this is called a soundboard. This is the, least audience-y recording that's out there. And if you've ever seen a big show in the South like this, people get loud. People get really, really loud. They're screaming and yelling and singing. And, you could hear there on that recording where it just takes over. That's all you can hear, basically.
Both these guys guessed 88, which means Gavin is the 3-time champ of Guest of the Year. Congratulations to you both. We'll go to Gavin. Tell us about 88.
I thought it was 87. And that extendo jam there at the end that I wasn't expecting got me thinking for some reason that it could be 88. It wasn't. But one thing I do want to say, this has been great. Dave, Todd, Gavin, Brownstein, 3 Jews, very happy.
It's a well-known phenomenon. There's quite a lot written about Fish and the Dead and Jewish youth.
Yeah, it's fantastic. So I just wanted to note that, but this was absolutely the hardest of any of the episodes because every song is so out of my comfort zone, and I just had to rely on my own instincts and just listening, from what I've listened to before. Thank you for curating this. This was just outstanding.
It's a total pleasure. Everybody did really well.
Dave, 88 as well. Talk to us.
Clearly, Jerry had a lust for life at this show. And I knew it was either going to be 87 or 88 because I heard Brent, but I wasn't hearing the plinky anymore. And the drums, I could have gone either way. The drums suggested 87 or 88. Again, close but no cigar. But I have to say, this is one of the most enjoyable evenings I've had in quite some time. I just enjoyed talking Dead with very knowledgeable Deadheads. That's my idea of a perfect weeknight.
Dave, thank you so much for coming on. It's been a pleasure hearing your insight and your story. And Beyond the Pond, it'll be in the show notes. Appreciate all the work you do.
You guys were great. Everybody was really just so knowledgeable and fun to talk to about all these ins and outs of all of it.
It's just so good to have you back on the show and have you be a part of the Guest Seer universe. Thanks for doing it.
Well, I appreciate the invite. It's super fun. My life has been topsy-turvy since I was on this show. I got people recognizing me at the grocery store left and right. When I came on originally, I was not really listening to a lot of Dead. I was listening to almost all Fish and Steely Dan. Being on the show put me back in a really positive headspace for the Dead. I've always drifted in and out my whole life of, listening more than other times. And so when I was first on the show, it really, really got me back into my own good headspace with the Dead. And it's just been super, super positive since then. And I just really appreciate the chance to come on and do the curation. Felt great to be on this side of the of the game.
Lower blood pressure.
Yeah.
Thank you again to Todd. Congrats to Gavin. And of course, Dave on the deep run. All the contestants tonight were amazing. Grant, Tommy, thank you so much. Again, Todd and John Brackett's book event will be in Wilmington, North Carolina on Friday, March 29th. It's at Fermental. And yeah, book talk, Dead cover band. It's going to be a good time. Check it out if you live in the area. Thank you again to Marla and everyone over at Scarlet Fire, small batch hot sauce. It seems like it really packs a punch. Fresno habanero and Thai chili peppers. Such a cool business. A name that was just begging to be made into a hot sauce, and they hopped on it. Good on them. It's non-GMO, vegan, gluten-free, no added sugar, all the good stuff you want in something you consume. So thank you so much, Scarlet Fire and Marla and everyone over there. Okay, for all the show links, including our YouTube channel, go to guesttheyear.net. And if you want to be a contestant on the show, sponsor the show, or make comments and ask questions, email us at info@guesttheyear.net. Shout out to Dylan for drawing the poster and James and Jack for helping out behind the scenes. Thank you so much for listening. Thanks to the amazing tapers whose recordings made this show possible. Congratulations to Gavin on the three-peat. And to other contestants, thanks for playing. And remember, it's all one song anyway.
And I bid you good night, good night, good night. And I bid you good night, good night, good night.